Hey everybody, it's Tom Cotter from America's Got Talent, comedian extraordinaire. And when I do a podcast, I only do the best, and I do Jim on Bass.
The Jim on Bass show has teamed up with my new friends at Old Hillside Bourbon Company. I got two of my favorite bottles here, straight bourbon whiskey and the straight rye whiskey. So whenever you want to get on base with that authentic Kentucky bourbon taste, make sure you visit oldhillsidebourboncompany.com, their social media, Old Hillside CO, or pick up a bottle at Bevmo and Total Wine. Old Hillside Bourbon Company. They'll always get you on base. Welcome back to another episode of the Jim on Bass show. For today's very special guest, we have on one of my favorite stand-up comedians. You've seen him on shows like Last Comic Standing and America's Got Talent. He's performed all over the world and has his own book called A Bad Dad, A Guide to Pitiful Parenting, and also has a new special coming out next week on April 16th. It's called Tom Cotter Rapid Fire Special. And please welcome the great Tom Cotter. Tom, it's good to see you.
Good to see you.
You're multi-talented. You got a little bit of everything going on.
Yeah. That's physical comedy. That's all I do right there.
Well, you told me a little bit before we started about your special coming out. I think, how can people see it? Where is it going to be available at?
Yeah, it'll be at the 16th of April, which is next week. It'll be on Amazon Prime and on Apple TV and probably other places after that once it's gone through that rotation. But we just shot it last summer and it's getting on the air now. So I'm thrilled with that. It only took, 8 months for it to get on the air. So thank God it's up. We'll see what happens with it.
Well, did you say anything good in it? Anything to get canceled by or anything hot like that?
I'm always getting, we walk on eggshells now. Comedians, everybody gets triggered so quickly now. And you're in the Bay Area, so I'm in New York City. They're both bastions of this, cancel culture thing that's going on now. And I try not to ruffle feathers, but, comedy is mocking. It's lampooning. It's, you can't do an hour of just self-deprecation where all you're doing is crapping on how short you are or how bad you are in bed. You have to be able to talk about other things. And now when you talk about other things, people cancel you, whereas before they were able to take a joke. So it's a weird time for comedy right now in the country.
Well, I can't remember who it was. I had somebody on. They said, well, no one's ever truly canceled. It's almost like a good thing for the career. So it's kind of funny in a way, right?
I don't know. I know some. There's a born-again Christian comic that's out there touring who's, I guess, does bits about being pro-life. And a bunch of people who are pro-choice started following his career and finding out where he was going to be and started protesting and calling the venue and saying, we're going to raise hell if you have this guy come. So now you're affecting his income. Yeah, and I may not believe with him, align with him politically or whatever, but he has every right, as I do, for freedom of speech to do what he wants to do. And if you don't want to buy a ticket, don't buy a ticket. But don't go canceling him just because you don't agree with something. And I have friends of mine that just were supposed to be in the Pacific Northwest. Jim Florentine is a buddy I tour with on the No Apologies tour, and a couple other guys, Jim Norton, I believe. And they were all summarily canceled from a club because the club had already booked them and then decided after researching them a little bit, we don't agree with their material, so we're going to cancel. Well, then why did you hire them? It's a crazy time, and I see my friends getting affected by it. Knockwood, it hasn't happened to me yet, but it's a tricky time. And a lot of my work, we talk about the C's in comedy. It's corporate, college, cruise ship, casino, comedy club. And corporate and college have the two deepest pockets. So you want to work those as much as you can because you get paid the most. And those, if you're a corporate buyer right now, are you going to be terrified about what the comedian's going to say, or are you going to hire the Bee Gees tribute band? You're probably going to go with the Bee Gees tribute band. So we're all seeing that kind of decline in the corporate work that we used to get a lot of. And, cruise ships are that way now. You got to be squeaky clean on cruise ships. You got to be squeaky clean almost everywhere you work now. And it's sad. I think it's a sad situation right now where comedy has been. I hope the pendulum swings back. I really do.
Yeah, that's a good point then. And you also mentioned a great name, Jim Florentine. I had him on the podcast. Great guy. And
right.
He's hilarious. So are you guys close? Or I know you're from the East Coast area.
I do a tour with him and a woman named Tammy Pescatelli, who's a very, very funny female comic. And the three of us do a thing called the No Apologies Comedy Tour. And we put it right in the name so that, if you're going to come with a chip on your shoulder, waiting for your feathers to be ruffled or waiting to be aghast and appalled and clutch your pearls, you see in the title of the show, we're not going to apologize. You know what you're getting. So
Yeah.
that's why I love working with them. Plus, they're hysterically funny. I really love both of their acts. And whenever we work together, we're all like, oh, God, one of us has to go at the end. No one wants to follow the other two. So it's an honor to share the stage with them both.
Well, you're speaking about doing a tour with them, and I think you're on tour right now, right? Didn't you just get back from some Florida dates, maybe?
Yeah, just did Florida and Aruba. I stuck in a little 3-day trip to Aruba to do Aruba Raise, which is a
Wow.
great comedy club at Aruba. And then right back to the second Snappers location. I was at Snappers in Tampa, and then Aruba, and then Snappers in Fort
Wow.
Myers. And now I'm back home in New York. But then this weekend I'm working in the city, and then back out on the road again. It's you got to be a road warrior in our business.
Yeah. Well, what happens when you get back home? I know you have a family, you're married, you have kids. So is there like a little bit of an easing in day to get back into family life? Or are you doing dad duties right away? Or
I've been doing this so long, Ryan. I've been doing this for 35 years. So my kids are now kind of grown. My two sons are juniors in college, and my twins, and then I have a younger guy who's 17, and so he's self-sufficient now, and he could care less about me. But yeah, so we get family dinners. We try to, when I am home, we try to do as much as we can. Tommy, my youngest, and I have a plan to go see a movie on Sunday together. So we try to do as much as we can, and thank God for Instagram and Facebook and FaceTime and all these things where I can now connect with my kids from
mm,
anywhere. Like in Aruba every day, I was able to talk to them. So that's all. It's a lot easier now than it used to be. When I was a little kid, when they were little kids rather, and I would go on the road, I would pack the night before. I usually take the early flights out in the
mm,
morning, and I put my bag by the door because I'm in a fog in the morning. I just want to grab my bag and go. And they would see my bag by the door, and they would, when they were really little, sit on the bag and scream. They knew it signaled to them, Dad's gone for a couple days. They're over that now. Now they're like, oh, good, Dad's gone. So
yeah.
it's different.
Yeah, now they know, okay, bags there, plan the party now.
Yeah, exactly. Get on the phone.
Would you guys have like family pets or anything?
We have one dog and two kitty cats. We had some goldfish. They did. They met an untimely end. But yeah, we've always been a pet family. Even though I lost to a dog act on national television, I still am a big fan of canines.
Well, it kind of makes sense. We're always the runners up to dogs anyway, right?
Allegedly, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, W.C. Fields have famously said, "Never try to follow an animal act or a kid act," and he's
Mm.
absolutely right. There's no way you're ever going to be able to do that, and America showed me that.
Well, we're talking about your family a little bit, and obviously your wife, Carrie, she's a comedian too. So I was just wondering, how did you meet, and how long have you been married now?
22 years, 23 in June. We met it was a workplace romance.
Mm.
Please don't tell HR. But we bump into each other at comedy clubs. I remember the first time I saw her at Nick's Comedy Stop in Boston, she was giving me the eyes, the I'm not interested. I have pepper spray. I would rather sleep with the Elephant Man. And she was just playing hard to get into the trunk of my car. But then later, I asked her out, and she couldn't say no because she still had the duct tape over her mouth. So it was more like, and then I kept seeing her after that every day through my binoculars. And then she finally succumbed to my masculine charm, apparently. And eventually she proposed to me, and I knew she was serious by the way she was holding the blade against my jugular. So here we are, almost 23 years into it.
Wow, quite the turnaround.
Oh, yeah.
Well, after you kidnapped her, what was the first date? What's kind of the go-to move?
First date, I treated her like royalty, Burger King and Dairy Queen, and then Mattress King, if you know what I'm saying. No, we started seeing each other right after we worked together in a ski resort up in New Hampshire. My parents happen to have a ski place up in New Hampshire, and we both got booked to do a gig up there.
Hmm.
And so I reached out to her and said, "Hey, we have this gig, but then part of the gig payment." They paid us very little money, but they said we could have free ski tickets. So I said, I'm going to use the free ski tickets. And I happen to have a place up there. And she said, what the heck? And she had promised herself she would never date any more comedians. And I had promised myself I would not, I don't want to use the term. I don't know how clean I have to be on here, but
Oh,
generally,
whatever.
you poop where you eat. I had dated a few waitresses in the past, and she had dated a few comics. Her nickname was Comic Relief. I kid. Um, so we went up there both saying, nope, no way are we getting into a relationship. And that was all tossed out the window. And we dated for about almost 6 years before we actually
Hmm.
got married. And so we've been together for over a quarter of a century.
Wow. Well, it makes me wonder because obviously people who are fans know that you and her perform together sometimes too. So, is
Yeah.
there a way? Is there like
But not in the bedroom, never in the bedroom. That's long gone.
yeah, it's over after what, the second year? Or?
Oh, maybe the first. Yeah. Once they say I do, they don't. But go ahead.
Well, you guys perform together, so makes me wonder: is it kind of a hard balance to, like, I imagine you do some writing together? Like, how do you turn it off when you don't want to be doing comedy? Is there kind of a balancing act to that, or?
Yeah, people think that we're this married comedy couple and that our house is constantly filled with laughter all the time. Wrong. There is some laughter in our house. It's usually her. It's in the bedroom and she's pointing, and I don't care for it. But yeah, we're a normal couple. We have the same struggles and same arguments that other people have, but I think we do diffuse some of our tension with humor or sarcasm. Sometimes that goes over well, sometimes it doesn't, but generally it does. And she's very tolerant of me, and I'm pretty tolerant of her because you had to be pretty tolerant to be married to a comedian because they are kind of always on. Whenever there's a chance to get a zinger, I don't care if you're at a wake or a funeral, you go for it. You're a comedian, and it can be a little much sometimes.
Yeah, I guess is it kind of hard to say when you're a parent to your kids, like, quit messing around when they know that you're comedians, or do they turn that around on you?
For the first several years, they had no idea what comedy was. That they assumed we were rodeo clowns or something. They had no idea what stand-up comedy was because they never watched it. They never
Mm.
encountered it. So it wasn't until really America's Got Talent where they were so lucky because America's Got Talent starts in March and it ends in September. So they had just gotten back to school, and because the further you go in the competition, you're on at the end. So I was in the finals, so the kids got to be on every episode because they kept doing backstories on my family.
Mm.
So my kids walked into school like they were, conquering heroes. So suddenly they kind of liked what mom and dad did for a living, but
Mm.
for years they hated it because I was on the road, and I never went in and did show and tell like some of the other parents did. They're my kids are they'll be in therapy one day, but they're pretty well adjusted right now.
Well, imagine then, at what age, since they're your kids, could they pop into clubs and ever see you perform, or how does that work?
Yeah, there I do some family friendly shows
Mm.
at some resorts up in the Poconos and the Catskills and cruise ships. I brought them on cruise ship gigs. When I go to Aruba, I generally bring them. Yeah, they've been around comedy a lot. They can probably do my act at this point and my wife's act. And all three have said to some degree that they're going to try it. My oldest son
Mm.
Cameron said he's just going to try it as a hobby. He wants to be an engineer. He's tunnel vision on that, but he said sometime he's not going to tell anybody, but he's going to sign up for an open mic night and just try it and see. And Harry, the other twin, actually opened up for us. We did Parents Weekend at University of Rhode Island, where they both go to school, and he was the opening act. He opened up for my
Wow.
wife, and then it was kind of a family affair. And my youngest Tommy is just a ham, so I'm confident he'll do it to some degree as well.
Well, that's funny because I was going to ask, since you have twins, I've heard that the gene like skips every other generation. So I was wondering if your grandkids were going to be comics, but it sounds like the kids are maybe picking it up.
Well, they certainly think they're funny. I disagree with them quite often, but yeah, they make me laugh very hard. They make me laugh probably harder than most comedians.
Well, when the kids were younger, it made me wonder, as you know, as a comedian, you perform at night and whatnot at the club. So would you stay home and watch the kids and then the wife performs and then vice versa? Or how did you guys work that out?
Yeah. Well, we had help. We had a nanny for a while when they were really young, so Carrie could work and I could work. And Carrie, my wife, um, to my amazement and to her credit, did what many women did. She put her career a little bit on the back burner so she could be at home for all the, little league lacrosse games and Boy Scouts and all the other crap that you have to do as a parent. So, I was on the road a lot, and so she did a lot of that heavy lifting. And now that my youngest is kind of self-sufficient, he's a lone wolf and he has his own car and he can get places. So she's able to now get out on the road a little more. She's doing a lot more. She's done 3 films in the last year.
Mm.
She's doing more TV. She's doing all that stuff. And so it's great that she's finally getting a chance to do that. And I've been very lucky that I've always been able to do that. And so between the two of us, we're both swinging away. And when we work together, it's great. I love working with her. However, we make more money when we work individually. And when
Oh,
she's headlining somewhere and I'm headlining somewhere, it's more lucrative for us. So it's a better deal for us.
oh, okay. Well, you grew up in Rhode Island, right? So I was just curious. When you think about that, what kind of stands out? Because when I was doing research for this, I just happened to randomly see an ad for a music festival that's coming up. I think it's a well-known one there, and like Chic's headlining, a couple other big bands. So, are you a music guy at all growing up there? Or?
To a degree, not tremendously, but Fort Adams is in Newport. They have a huge jazz festival that's renowned. I think
That's the one.
next to the Newport next to the New Orleans Jazz Festival, I'd say Newport is probably the second. If you go back in history, all the huge great names have all played there, and it's great. Newport's so gorgeous. I'm a big fan of Rhode Island. I know people make a lot of fun of it. We are smallest in size, but number one in teen pregnancy. But it's a great state, and I'm proud of my Ocean State roots. I would have stayed there, but there's no comedy world there, really. There's one club, and it's a great club, but you can't, work one club your whole life. So for what we do, I have to be in New York or LA. Now, I guess you can be in Vegas and Florida.
Hmm.
But when I started, you had to be in New York or LA, and we did both of them, and we settled in New York. And New York has been a great place for Kerry and I to make a living and have a great time.
And you were the youngest of 6 kids, so I feel like being a comedian, as you know, it takes a lot of being observant and noticing little things and kind of building jokes, right? So when you're the youngest of 6 kids, is that kind of where it starts? So you're kind of noticing things growing up?
It's more of needing attention. When you're the youngest of six, you get. I remember when pizza would get delivered to our house, I would have to spit on a piece to make sure it was mine. Because you're the youngest, you get abused. I got ignored. My parents, they would sit me down. We had a little sandbox at our house, and I would sit there and play for hours until the cat had to poop, and then I had to leave. It was very sad, but yeah, yeah. You act out because you want attention, because you don't get it. And I haven't done a formal study of this, but my wife is the youngest of four. I'm the youngest of six. So many of my friends who are comics are the youngest in their families. I think there's something to that. The youngest is I think in most families, nuclear families, the oldest is the most anal, the most driven, the most kind of down to earth, or if you will, and the youngest is always the most aloof and the most theatrical and the most outgoing. At least that's been my experience, and in my informal study, it seems to bear that out.
That's interesting too, because I've heard lead singers of bands say that. Like they've noticed they all have problems with their dad. And I don't know if there's something to do with that, but no tragedies along the way. Everything was kind of normal
Well,
otherwise.
my mom died relatively young. My
Mm,
mom died when she was 52, and I was
wow.
14 at the time. And so that was a kick in the gut.
Hmm.
But, like anything else, tears of a clown. I think all comedians have some kind of tragedy in their past. And it was rough for me because my oldest sister and there's 3 boys and 3 girls. The oldest girl and the youngest boy were the favorites of the mother. I was a mama's boy. And so
Mm.
I was lost for a couple of years after that, but you find your way, and we've our family has been bonded like Elmer's glue ever since, and so it's all great. I miss her all the time. I wish my sons had met her.
Mm.
That they'll never know their grandmother, but we keep her memory alive with photos and videos and discussions and stuff. So yeah, I think every comic has some kind of sadness in their past, and from the tears come the laughs. So that,
Yeah.
or so it seems.
Well, I know your dad was a neurosurgeon, right? So did you visit him at work, or was there any interest in that growing up, or what did he think about comedy?
My dad really worked hard. My dad was a hardworking son of a teacher in Boston. Went to dropped out of Boston College after one year to go join the Navy. not drafted. He wanted to go be a part of World War II, became an ensign. After that, the GI Bill put him through 3 years at Brown University
Wow.
and Tufts Medical School. So thank God for the GI Bill.
Yeah.
And he raised 6 kids and put us all through prep school and college because the private school, the public schools in Providence at the time were a nightmare. And so, he really worked hard to keep us, kind of on that. Education was huge in him. For his dad was a teacher, and so all of us embraced that learning thing that my dad had. He was the most brilliant man I ever knew. So when his youngest, after 4 years of college, announced that he wanted to tell jokes to drunks and strangers in basements, he was not thrilled, but he was never really a jerk about it. He was. I kept it from him for a while,
Mm.
and then one of his surgical nurses happened to see me at a comedy club and ratted me out to my dad. But he was. It took him a long time to come around because the first things I did were VH1, which his generation has no idea what VH1, MTV, no idea, Comedy Central, no idea. But when I did the Tonight Show,
Mm.
finally, we knew who Johnny Carson was. It was Leno when I did it, but at least he knew that I wasn't a complete waste of sperm at that point. And then he got to come up and be part of the America's Got Talent
Mm.
run, which was probably the greatest thing in my career. And it was towards the end of his life.
Mm.
So I'm glad he got to see that at the end, and he was very supportive, surprisingly supportive for a guy with his background and what he had all done. And I miss him dearly. He
Mm.
passed 2 years ago,
Okay.
but I got to keep him around till he was 98. So as much as I lost my mom too young, I got my dad there till the very end, and I'm blessed in that regard.
Well, that's great, and it made me wonder too about when you're growing up. Was there any pressure to kind of go a medical route, or was there an older sibling that kind of went that route already? So did it take the
You know
pressure
what?
off?
Out of 6 kids, Ryan, not one of us went into the medical field.
Ah.
Zero. And I'll tell you why, because my dad worked so hard.
Mm.
He was on call every night at least one hospital. He had a beeper before anybody had beepers. And he was, he missed he went to one wrestling match my entire high school
Wow.
career. And I'm not mad about that because I know how hard he was working. It wasn't like he was out at strip clubs. He was, you know, cracking backs and cracking skulls and doing surgery. He was in the operating room first in the morning. He was chief of staff, so he decided he'd like to get his surgeries done. So by the time I got out of bed, he was already in surgery. And at night, late at night, when I was tucked into bed, he was doing rounds, visiting his patients post-op. So I loved his work ethic. I understood it, and so I don't begrudge that he wasn't around for a lot of things when I was growing up. He was there financially for all of us through all of that, and I think that was kind of that generation. That's what they did, and
Mm.
so yeah, I have nothing but good things to say about my dad. He's like a hero to me, and all 6 of us went in a different field because he worked so hard.
Mm.
And it was at the end, it was just he was just so disenchanted by the whole medical field, by
Mm.
malpractice insurance had gotten so he was spending 200 grand a year
Wow.
just on malpractice insurance because I think obstetricians were number one, but neurosurgeons were number two sued, and so you had to have that coverage, and so. We it didn't look like something that appealing. He worked very hard, and he didn't seem to love it at the end.
Mm.
So we all went our different paths.
Well, you went to Moses Brown College Prep School, right? So I was
Yeah,
wondering what that was like. I read that it was like a Quaker testing ground for AstroTurf too. So that's kind of
we had the
interesting.
first AstroTurf in the country. Wow, you did do your research. Yes, Moses Brown. There were two Brown brothers. One started Brown University in Providence. John
Okay.
Carter Brown. His brother Moses started the K through 12th grade private school, and it is a Quaker school. And Quakers, of course, are most known for pacifism. And so, a guy who played football and lacrosse and wrestled, three violent sports, it's hard to be tough when you're known as the pacifists. Like the other teams did not, tremble in fear when the Quakers took the field. But it was great. It's what a phenomenal school. I'm so blessed. I thank God and my lucky stars that I got to I went to Catholic school for a few years before that, and to this day, if I see a ruler, it's like a Vietnam flashback. The nuns like to beat on me a little bit. So, yeah, I went to Moses Brown in fourth grade all the way till I graduated in 12th grade, and those friendships and the people I met and the education I got, priceless. I'm forever indebted to that institution, and I will always wave the flag.
And the knees are good from the AstroTurf, or
Yeah, they were fine. It was crappy AstroTurf because it was the first.
yeah, that's a good point.
We had Howard Johnson went to our school. From Howard Johnson's, a lot of people went to Moses Brown, but that guy did, and he wanted to give us an ice hockey rink for our hockey team. And our headmaster at the time said, "No, we're an academically minded institution. I think that would send the wrong message." And he gave the ice rink to a rival prep school, and we had to go play against our rival prep school on our ice in our ice rink at their school, and it was infuriating for my. But anyway, I'll get over that one.
Yeah. Well, you also went to Denison University, right? So, did you get your degree in political science? Is that what it was, or?
I did. And now I tell jokes about my penis in front of strangers. So well done. What a fine use of academic spending that was. Yeah. And Denison, another one. I'm very lucky. I stepped in leprechaun poop because I ended up in, for what I consider, those are, and I say this in front of my wife. I didn't know her then. Those are the best 4 years of my life. I loved my time at Denison. 2 years after me, or a few years after me, Jennifer Garner graduated, and a few years before me, Steve Carell graduated.
Wow.
And Steve Carell makes $20 million a movie. And do you think he could put me in one film? One. That's it. I don't even a speaking role, just a cameo. Can I walk by, Steve? Nothing. And there's only 2,000 students at Denton. It's a tiny little Division III school. He couldn't hook a brother
Yeah.
up.
You got the alumni discount right there.
I should, but anyway, I'm kidding, of course. I'm a big fan of Steve Carell's and Jennifer Garner's, and Hal Holbrook went there as well. So we have a nice little arch tradition there, and some other great people went there. But I loved it. I still value those friendships. I go on a ski trip every year with my fraternity brothers from there, and we go on a canoe trip every summer. And those friendships have lasted for 40 years, and I cherish them.
Well, I asked you a little bit earlier about music, kind of with the Newport Festival. So I do like asking people, athletes, comedians, who was your first concert? Did any bands stick out, or?
Yeah, Aerosmith. I saw Aerosmith at the Providence Civic Center when I was a kid, and my most vivid memory, I was 12 years old. That's bad parenting.
Wow, yeah.
We went with a bunch of other kids, and our parents dropped us off, and they were there to pick us up at the end. But I remember walking in. This is how corrupt Providence was at the time. They searched you as you walked in. So they were taking booze bottles out of these kids' things, and instead of throwing them in a garbage can, they were putting them in an ice bucket, which meant they were going to drink them later. It's like, really? You couldn't put that behind a curtain? You're going to show us that you're doing that? And my brother, so crafty, went to that same concert. He was older than me. He went with his friends. He went to my dad's office and got some syringes, and he injected vodka into oranges. And then when he went through security, he said, "I'm diabetic. I need an orange." And they let him bring the oranges in. And then he opened up the orange, and he ate the orange and got hammered at Aerosmith. Genius. It's genius.
That is genius. Well, it's funny because I just saw again this morning, Aerosmith just released their final date, supposedly. So their farewell tour. Yeah, they're coming around.
I cannot believe these guys. I went to my first Grateful Dead concert this fall at MetLife Stadium here in New York where the Mets play. And it's the first time I've ever gone to the Grateful Dead. I'm going to see them again in June at the Sphere in Vegas.
Oh, no, I saw U2 there.
Amazing. I would much rather have seen U2. U2 is one of my favorite bands. I'm an Irish. They're one of my all-time. The Who is probably number one, and U2 is number two. So I would have loved to have seen that. I'm jealous that you got to see them. But I'm psyched to go see the Dead. But when I go to a Dead concert, I feel young. I mean, everybody's ancient. It's all gray-haired people walking around, and women still don't wear bras, which is unfortunate because at that age they're tripping over them. And just seeing instead of throwing panties, they're throwing Depends. It's sad, but I went to so many concerts when I was a kid. I was very lucky to do that, and those are all very fond memories.
I'm telling you, U2 at the Sphere was amazing. You're going to like the Sphere. You might want to inject acid or something if you can into the orange and try that.
I'll take your advice. I don't know. Is acid a liquid? I don't even know if I've never done it, so I don't know.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned seeing them at the Met Stadium. So are you into sports at all? Like, who are your favorite teams?
Yeah, I love sports. It's spring. I actually played minor league baseball. Little League is what it's called. And my mom was the coach. and she traded me. I'll never get over that. She traded me to a baby to be born later. But I do love sports. I play tennis on grass because I hit the ball better when I'm high. And I did some wrestling in college. I didn't want to, but my roommate was a 300-pound gay man, and he found me attractive. And he won every match. I don't want to talk about it, but sorry, I'm doing bits now in your podcast. I feel bad about that.
No, that's great.
Yeah, I love sports. I'm a New England guy. I grew up in New England, so I'm in New York. I feel like a Palestinian living in an Israeli village because I'm a Bruins, Red Sox, Celtics, and Patriots fan. Let's see if I think I do. Yeah, there's
Oh
the
yeah.
Patriots belt right there.
I thought you
Which
were going
they
to show your Patriots panties for a second. I was like, wait, hold
I
on.
have those too, but I'm not going to do that. I won't soil your podcast with my filth. But yeah, it's tough to be a Patriots or Red Sox fan right now because they
Yeah.
suck so bad. But the Bruins and Celtics are keeping me alive. They're both great right now. And my kids, I don't know how I raised three kids in New York. My twins were born in Harlem. We had a place in Harlem. They spent the first 5 years of their life in Harlem, and then they moved here to the burbs. And my son Tommy was born here in the burbs and has been here his whole life. And they're still loyal to their Boston roots somehow. They got bullied to death at school. After the Giants beat them in the Super Bowl, they didn't want to go to school. They cried. They're like, "We don't want to go to school. You take your beating like Daddy does every day from hecklers. You go. It builds character."
Yeah, when you say the burbs, where is that in New York?
We're in Stony Point, New York. We're out
Okay.
here. The zip code is EIEIO. It's 30 miles from Midtown, but you wouldn't know it. There's deer and bear and foxes and all kinds
Wow.
of stuff. Now you must be a San Francisco fan. Are you a 49ers guy? Are you
Yeah,
a Giants
Niners,
guy?
Giants, and Warriors. So those are my teams. Die
Oh,
hard. Yeah, true fan.
not the San Jose Sharks. You're not a hockey guy.
Well, since I do have athletes on, I gotta say I'm a casual Sharks fan. But I've had Mike Modano on, Joe
Nice,
Pavelski. I don't know if you know those guys.
love them.
Yeah, so I need to try and get some more hockey guys on.
Hockey guys are great. I've done two. Let me tell you two quick stories. I did two. I did one for the Devils when they were in
Mm.
the playoffs, and a show for them. And I showed up, no microphone, in the back room of a restaurant in Jersey, and they're all from another country. Stevens was their big defenseman at the time. He was the only one who spoke English, and I'm a comedian with no microphone. Before me, they had a close-up magician. So the guys from the Czech Republic, Russia, Sweden, they all loved the close-up magician. But then the comedian comes on. They don't understand what the hell I'm saying. I died a horrible death in front of a bunch of professional athletes. But the better part of that was when the Islanders had their Christmas party one year. They hired me to go out to the Garden City Hotel on Long Island. And I got so drunk that Mike Milbury had to buy me a hotel room because I couldn't
Wow.
drive home. At the end of the night, I'm standing around the piano singing with all these guys. Some of the dumpiest guys, missing teeth, had the hottest wives I've ever seen in my life. Even the pregnant women were like tens. You're like, oh my god! I don't know how hockey men get it. The women, it's spectacular. The beauty in that room. I've never seen how many gorgeous, but they all spoke English, so that show went much better.
Well, besides the beautiful women, I thought maybe you're gonna say you're inside of a Walmart for a second.
No, I do. I do go on whale watches every once in a while. Those are WalMarts in Orlando.
Well, did you have you ever had those moments in your life when you're getting into comedy, like what am I gonna do with my life career wise, or did you have like regular jobs before you kind of took off, or?
You have to when you start because when you start you're not making any money. You're doing open mics.
Mm.
You're called an open micer or an opener, and there's really no money. You're driving 5 hours for $50, which pays for your gas tank. That's about it. But that's when you're scratching and clawing, and so you generally have a day job. When I first got out of school, I was a cop on Nantucket for a little while, and then a cop buddy from Nantucket left to start a private investigative firm on the
Huh.
mainland. And I didn't want to be on this rock off the coast of Massachusetts during the winter. So it was a summer job for me that bled into the fall. And then finally I said, I want to try comedy. And Nantucket was not a comedy mecca at the time. So I knew I needed to be on the mainland. So my buddy said, come on, work with me. And being a private investigator, along with two other comics that are friends of mine, Justin McKinney and Al Boucharm, both very funny people. They were in my wedding. They were private investigators too, and it was a perfect job because you could pick your surveillance times because you followed people around and documented their activity, and you could do that all the time, and then still do shows at night and travel far to go to shows at
Hmm.
night, and then pick when you wanted to do here. So it was a means to an end. I never wanted to be a private investigator. It just was a job that fit as I pursued comedy, and then finally you get to a point where you're making enough money in comedy to divorce yourself from the day job, and then you can be full bore, 100% in on comedy, which is what I was. And but you always had, when I was living in New York, I was doing commercials during the day and then stand up at night, and then you start working on cruise ships, and you start doing corporate events, and that other things happen kind of peripherally, but it's always been stand up for me. That's always been my passion.
Hmm.
It always will be. And I will never retire. I will not be a Walmart greeter. I will be telling jokes as long as they'll listen to me. And I belong to the Friars Club in New York City, and some of those guys are in their late hundreds, and they never quit. These guys all have World War II pensions and residuals from some sitcom that was on in the '60s, but they still want to be on
Hmm.
the stage, and they never want to get rid of it. And I assume that that's going to be me, and I'm pretty sure my wife's going to want to keep working, and hopefully it'll keep us young.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that because I had Tom Dreesen on little over a year ago via
Big
Zoom.
fan, great guy.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm going in a few weeks to LA to do an in person, so it's gonna be kind of cool.
Oh,
It's just
nice.
amazing. It keeps going.
That guy has some stories, boy.
Yeah.
He's been around for forever. So he was there during the Catskills times. He was there during the Friars times. He's got, he's had great experiences opening for people and having people open for him, and he's just a legend. So
Yeah.
great.
Well, we kind of mentioned earlier about open mic. So, do you remember your first one? Like, how did it happen, and how did it go?
My first time on stage was at we had a muscular dystrophy telethon kind of thing at my college, Denison
Hmm.
University, and I had run for president the year before, and I had lost. I didn't, I, you know, and running for president of the DCGA, which is Denison Community Campus, no, Campus Government Association. You had to paint yourself as a goody two shoes, which I did. But then once I lost, I was like, well, all bets are off. I'm going to show them my real side. So this talent show came up at this muscular dystrophy weekend we were doing. And so I said, I'm going to enter as a stand up. And all I did is eviscerate the faculty, the administration, the fraternity, everything. And I got disqualified from the competition. But for the next 2 weeks, I was getting high fives on campus from people I had never met before because I said stuff that everyone was thinking that no one was allowed to say. And I'm shocked to this moment I didn't get expelled or suspended. But regardless, that was my first time on stage. And then I knew I wanted to try it, but I was a cop on Nantucket and there were
Hmm.
no stages. And so I went to the mainland, and in Providence, Rhode Island, my hometown, there was a comedy club called Periwinkles. And I went to their open mic night literally every week. It was Wednesday night. I would go and I'd sit in the back of the room. And the guy who hosted it every week, a guy named Charlie Hall, kept seeing me there every week. And finally, after about 8 weeks of watching me come in and watch from the back, he said, nobody comes to an open mic night to watch 8 weeks in a row. Clearly, you want to try this, but you don't have the balls. So here's the deal. I'm going to tell the bouncer not to let you in next week unless you go up on stage. And so he said, so that's it. If unless you go on stage, you're not getting in. And I said, all right. And so he lit the fire under my ass, and I did it. And I did 10 jokes. Two of them worked, eight of them crashed and burned, but those two were enough to get me fired up to try again. And I came back, and I died a horrible death for a few weeks there on open mic nights. And I ran away and quit for a little while, couple months. And then I said, no, I'm going to get back in the saddle and try it again. And then I never fell off the saddle rather. So I've been doing this for a long time since 1989, I think.
Wow. I imagine when you're performing in a place you grew up, is the maybe the one of the biggest nerve wracking things is to get up there and then see someone from high school or someone that you kind of know.
You're very intuitive to know that. Yeah, when it's a faceless group, I don't no skin in the game. I'm not emotionally connected to most of my audiences. I want to entertain them. I'm going to give them my A list material. I'm going to try as hard as I can, A for effort. But it's not like I have a vested interest in or a connection with any of them. When I did when I do shows and like my dad's in the crowd or my
Mm.
mom or my mom was never around. I'm sorry, my sisters or my brothers or my wife, my kids. Then obviously the stakes are a little higher, even if it's an old teacher of mine or a classmate. So that's why AGT was so scary. There was 20 million people viewing, and I knew that everybody from my past was tuning in at the end, the last, the quarterfinals, the semis, and the finals. and they were just doing it to be supportive, but at the same time, that's nerve wracking. And I was at the time in my late 40s, and I had acne, I had diarrhea, I lost 20 pounds that summer because I was shitting in my pants every. Pardon my language. I was very nervous, and so yeah, that it's when there's people that you care about in the crowd, uh, then it's not like they're judging you, but you feel like you're being judged. So
Yeah.
stakes are much higher, and you have a much less give a crap factor. And when it's a show full of people, I don't know.
Well, I've seen you do some videos too, like where you're kind of filming yourself doing like a bit in your car. So it makes me wonder, how long does it take you to get to like somewhere like the Comedy Cellar? I went there last year for the first time. And when you get there, where do you park? It seems like a very congested area.
I'm there this weekend, actually, so I have to deal with that this weekend. Yeah, it's always a nightmare to park down there. And now we're doing this thing in Manhattan called congestion pricing, which is they're going to charge you an extra $15 if you go south of 60th Street. Well, everything good in Manhattan south of 60th Street, including the West Village, which is where the Comedy Cellar is. But regardless, it's the room. It's a cool place to perform. Everyone loves it, and so yeah, I'll be there this weekend, Friday and Saturday, two shows each at those clubs, and I might bop around and do some other clubs in the city. So yeah, is that what your question was? How do I park? I get
Yeah.
there early enough, and I just drive around like some guy stalking a woman looking for a space. It's very creepy, but
And when you're doing
luckily
both, it works out, right?
I eventually find one, and I'll come out and my car will be keyed, but that's all
Yep.
right. At least I'm working in the city and having fun.
Yeah, that was just surprising because I thought if you're performing, there'd be like a special spot for you guys, but I guess not. Huh? You're still stressing like everyone else, hoping your window's not bashed out.
Not for me. The cellar has people like Ray Romano and Seinfeld popping in, and Chris Rock and Amy Schumer and Chappelle. They might hold their. I think one of the bouncers will guard their Lamborghini when it's parked out front. But I have to park my Jeep, on the street somewhere. So yeah, there's a hierarchy, and I'm not at that level.
Well, I know you've toured and played all over the world, places like England, China, right? So it made me wonder. I went to London recently, and what I heard from some of the people was that the people there are kind of a little bit more reserved. So do you pick up on that when you tour different places, like different tastes or ways to break down the crowd?
You have to. I'm going to do 2 weeks in Paris this summer during the
Mm,
Olympics, and so I'm going to have to do what I did in London and what I do when I go to Hong Kong every couple of years to work out there. Um, you have to do a little bit of research. When I
mm,
did London, I was tuning up for a show. Their version of Evening at the Improv was called Live at Jongleurs, and so I had to work at a bunch of rooms before I did the TV taping because you have to learn that an apartment is a flat, and a
mm,
cigarette is a fag, and an elevator is a lift, and those are all lines from my act that I had to change so that you can still connect with the audience. I do a joke about Cocoa Puffs. They don't have those in England, so you
uh,
have to change things and adapt to your audience. And same is true in Hong Kong is just a melting pot. When I do Hong Kong, it's expats from everywhere, Canada, English
mm.
speaking, but it's all Canadians, Australians, Brits, Americans, English speaking, French people, English people, German people. So you're not going to be able to get everybody in the loop, but you just try to utilitarian, hit the max amount of people with the most you can, and you're never going to. Not everyone is going to get every reference or every joke, but in the span of a half hour or 45-minute set, you're going to make them laugh.
Mm.
There's something that in there that they're going to be able to identify with, and plus. Laughter's infectious, and everybody around you is laughing. Even if you don't get the joke, you start laughing. So it works out.
Well, when it comes to America's Got Talent, it made me think. Obviously, it's a star-studded panel of judges, but Howard Stern, I'm a big fan of him. He seems to really dig your style. Seems like he always has appreciated the arts too, when it comes to musicians and stuff. So, do you have a relationship with him at all, or friendship, or?
Just he's had me on the show, his show, and he's had my wife on the show, and I've done his wife's. She has a big charity benefit
Mm.
for the
Oh,
North Shore
animals.
League. Yeah, she's a real cat lover, and so there's the Stern Pavilion, which is a giant building they built to help stray cats, and so I've gone to support that and tell jokes at that. I'm always going to be indebted to Howard Stern. I was intimidated by him I thought he would be the toughest judge on me, but he
Mm.
was actually the coolest. He was the nicest. Howie Mandel was very nice because he's a comedian as well.
Yeah.
And Sharon Osbourne was my other judge, and she wanted the dog act that beat me to win. So she's dead to me.
Yeah.
But I for years I wouldn't do the show. I
Mm.
didn't try out until the seventh season, and everyone said my act. If you viewers don't know, I'm a rapid fire guy. I'm a one liner guy, kind of. So I can cram a lot of one liners into the 90 seconds they give you. They only give you 90 seconds on that show to perform, and so everyone, year after year, managers, agents, other comedians, club owners would say, "You're perfect for the show. You got to go out for the show." And at the time, Pierce Morgan was a judge.
Mm.
And people don't know this, but Pierce, when he was a child in England, had a stick surgically stuck up his ass. And so he hated American comics. And I would watch the show. I was a fan of the show before I got on it. And he would eviscerate the American comedians. And I'm like, I'm not going to get up there and have this, British pompous douche
Yeah.
shit all over me in front of America. So I'm not doing it. And then when I found out that Howard Stern was replacing him as a judge, I was like, well, now I've got Howard
Mm.
Stern, I've got Howie Mandel, and the wife of the Prince of Darkness. If ever there was a panel of judges that was amenable to a comedian, so that's why I went out for it season 7, and the rest is history. And they were very nice. I came back season 8, and they had replaced Sharon with 2 women, Mel B and Heidi Klum,
Mm.
and they were very nice to me as well. It wasn't until I went back for Champions, which they now call All Stars, in the winter, and Simon Cowell hated me. He gave me an X because I walked out. I lost to a dog act famously, and I walked out with a dog as a little gag, and I introduced the dog as Mr. Simon Growl, and he instantly hated me. But the other 3 judges and the audience were very nice, and it was still a great experience. But that was my only X I ever got, was from another British pompous douche.
Yeah. It
So
must be an England thing.
it is. They just don't get American comedy.
Well, you said you're kind of like a bam bam guy, one liner. So obviously, does that take a lot of writing, and you just kind of go over it over and over and over till you're not really thinking?
It's
And
kind of
just
a puzzle piece. A lot of people tell stories. My wife is kind of a storyteller, and so it's a humorous story throughout with a big payoff at the end.
mm,
Cosby is kind of that way. A lot of old storytellers, but I'm more of the Rodney Dangerfield. And I'm not comparing myself. He's the god. But Stephen Wright is a one-liner
mm,
guy. These Mitch Hedberg, they're all one-liner guys. I try to do a one-liner and I try to link them together somehow. But Wendy Liebman does it. She's brilliant at it. If your viewers have seen her, if they shouldn't, they should look her up. She's
mm.
great. A guy named Don Gavin is the guy I really modeled my career after. He is a Boston legend, and he's just so funny and my favorite comic probably ever, because he does the one-liner thing with a lot of taglines and with a thick Boston accent and a lot of attitude, and he's brilliant at it. Brian Kiley's another guy. So yeah, it's kind of like putting together a Rubik's cube. It's tough to link all the one-liners together because it's called misdirection, and it's setup, punchline, which is your normal joke, but we take it on and on and on with just killing a joke with taglines after it ad nauseum, and each tagline takes it a different way. So, like a Wendy Liebman, I don't know one of her jokes off the top of my head, but I say I might. I just found my ex-girlfriend needs a kidney transplant. I'm not worried because her body hasn't rejected an organ in 25 years. And then there's a bunch of taglines after
Mm.
that that kind of link it all together. It's all about her, but each tagline takes it in a different direction. So it just keeps the audience kind of on the edge of their seat, and they have to pay attention.
Well, that made me think too about I love your videos that you post of crowd work, and I had Adam Ray on. I don't know if you know him or
I'm not familiar with Adam.
okay. He's from Seattle. He's more on the West Coast, but he does some great crowd work too. And I asked him, how do you do that? Like respond so quickly? And he said how the key for him is to when you ask the crowd member something, you actually have to listen to what they say instead of anticipating what you're going to say. Is that kind of the big key for you, or?
That, and you also have to repeat what they say because the audience can't hear them. You
Uh,
have the microphone, so it's and that repeating what they said tells the audience what the person said, so they know they get both sides of the dialogue. But it also gives you another second to think about what you want to say. So let's say I say, Ryan, what do you do? And you say, I'm a fireman and I do a podcast. Oh, you're a fireman, you do a podcast. While I'm saying that, I'm going, what do I have for being a fireman and being a podcaster? And then that gives you that extra second to jump into it. And crowd work's always fun, and that's why Matt Rife has made a great living off of it recently. And there are people that are really, really good at it, and then there are others that should probably stick to their material. But yeah, it's always fun to do. I love going to the crowd because I know what I'm going to say. My act, I've done it before. It's tried and true material. I never know what the person, the audience, is going to say. And then when it becomes a dialogue, it's just more engaging for me. It gets my heart racing more because now there's a lot more at stake here because I don't know where the next sentence is going to come from and where it's going to go. So I always have a fun time doing it.
Well, we kind of mentioned some of the big comics that go to the cellar, like Ray Romano. When I was there, I saw Dave Attell. So another podcast I love listening to is Mark Maron. I think he's a Boston guy, right?
Yeah. I think he went to school in Boston. I think he's a New Mexico guy originally, but I
Oh,
started
okay.
with him. I started about his time. Boston's a great comedy town. Sorry to interrupt you, but when I started in Boston, we had Jay Leno, Stephen Wright, Dennis Leary, and most
Wow.
recently coming out of that same stable was Louis C.K., Dane Cook, Joe Rogan, Billy Burr. I mean, it's amazing the people that came out of Boston as of late. It's such a factory of funny. And you mentioned Seattle before. I was out there for the Seattle comedy competition years ago, so I get to hang out there with a bunch of those comics. That's a great comedy town. There's some really great guys out of Brad Upton is just phenomenal, and there's some really great Kermit Pio or Pio. I can't remember his name, how you pronounce it, but some really great comics have come out of.
Awesome. Well, it made me wonder though, all those big names, did anyone take you under their wing, or do you remember a time where maybe someone kind of gave you the stamp of approval that got you excited when you were starting out?
Yeah, there were guys who were really nice to me, but what they did do, not take me under their wing, they really hotboxed me. I started with Rogan
Mm.
and with a guy named Mike McCarthy, and the three of us at about the same time. I was a little before Rogan and about the same time as McCarthy, but the three of us were like the three filthy guys. I had 15 minutes, and it was all filthy. And so the headliners would say to us, look, you guys don't seem like you're bad guys, but none of us want to work with you. We don't want you to open for us because you're filthy and you ruin the audience. You go up there and do your bits about banging fat women, and then I got to get up there and do some clean and clever stuff, and it's just not working. So, they said to me, you're hurting yourself by being as dirty as you are.
Hmm.
And if you want to work on cruise ships one day, if you want to work at a college, if you want to work at a corporate gig, you have to clean it up, or a country club. You're never going to be able to work those rooms. Sure, there are some clubs that'll use you, but you're limiting yourself if you're filthy. And they were right, and I took their advice. And Rogan said, go pound sand. And look where his career is right now. So I don't know who was right, but I'm glad I took their advice. And I've given that same advice to guys when I've seen them kind of going down that path where, freedom of speech, you can do whatever you want. But the dirtier you are, the more limited you become. Like, Dave Attell is brilliant, but he's not going to do a lot of corporate events because it's too risky for them. He's got a brilliant career without it, as has Rogan. But for most of us, you want the maximum amount of work. And the maximum amount of work means you have to be able to work in front of any audience. So when you're working on a cruise ship, you got to work in front of little kids and their great grandparents and everybody in between. Same with America's Got Talent. So they all told me I was limiting myself, and I took their advice to heart. And that guy mentioned before, Don Gavin, was very tolerant of me following him around and asking him questions and everything because I just thought he was the funniest thing in the world. I still do. And other guys, Kevin Knox was a guy who was really nice to me. God rest his soul. When I started, Charlie Hall, the guy that ran that open mic night in Providence, has become a mentor for me over the years, and I still go to him for advice. Yeah, and I like to impart my advice now that I'm long in the tooth in this business to the younger people. Generally, I don't do it unsolicited, but when they ask me, I'm more than willing to tell them, the lumps that I've learned along the way and how to avoid them.
Well, that made me think of Bob Saget too, right? He kind of had the dirty act, but then he's doing Full House.
Yeah. Well, he went really dirty because he wanted to dispel
Uh,
the his public persona of the squeaky clean guy, and he was annoyed because he was on the show that you had to be the cleanest. It's America's Funniest Home Videos.
oh
There is no
yeah.
more Vindabona Productions. There's no more squeaky clean show. So that's why he went so far the other way. He swung the pendulum so far the other way. But yeah, Bob had a great career. God rest his soul.
Mm,
We've lost too many recently.
yeah.
It's very sad. I've unfortunately had to attend too many
Mm,
memorial services and funerals for my fellow funny people, and it's very sad. Bob is missed.
yeah, definitely. Rest in peace, Bob Saget. And I saw your shirt there. It made me wonder, what is your home club?
This is the Comedy Center. This is the National Comedy Center. It's up in Jamestown, New York, which is
Mm,
Lucille Ball's hometown. It's
uh,
a great museum. It's if people are ever going to get the deal was that what they wanted to do is they wanted to make kind of a mecca for comedy and a Hall of Fame, if you will, but they
mm,
couldn't call it the Hall of Fame, so they call it the National Comedy Center, and it's really the best museum you've ever been to in your life. I tell people if you ever find yourself now, Jamestown's a little off the beaten path. It's up south of Buffalo, but you can go to Cooperstown and
mm.
go to the Baseball Hall of Fame and then scoot straight across 90, hit that, and keep going across the 90 to Akron and do it all in like 2 days. And you'll see three of the best museums you've ever seen in your life. It's brand new, state of the art. You've never been to a museum where people are howling with laughter with headphones on, listening to old monologues from Johnny Carson and Merv Griffin, and all the way up to the latest comedy that's out there now. It's really
Wow.
it's the best place. People should go to it. Favorite club of mine? Well, because I'm working the Comedy Cellar this weekend, I will probably say locally, I love the Cellar. I love the comic strip in New York. I
Mm,
love stand up New York in New York, Gotham. We have so many great clubs. West Side Comedy Club's a new club in Manhattan that I adore. When I'm on the road, God, I've had some really fun times at the Tempe Improv. I love going back to
mm,
Boston to the Wilbur Theater. That's warm, near and dear to my heart. Helium in Philly has always been
mm.
just so many, and they go, for a couple years it'll be my favorite club, and then a new manager will come in and
Uh,
ruin it. So things are cyclical, but I've just been very blessed to be able to work at so many great clubs over the years. Again, almost 4 decades of it, and God, I'm sure I'm leading a million out, but I really love all the clubs that I work on a regular basis.
well, I've never been able to see you live. I just seen your stuff online and on Instagram.
I'm
So
live
me,
right now, Ryan. I'm live
what?
right now on Pulse.
Yeah, no, but it made me wonder what goes into you coming to like the. I love taking road trips to the Improv in Hollywood or like the Comedy Store. Has it been a while, or how does that kind of
Yeah.
happen for you?
I don't get out to LA. The last two times went out to LA, I went out for two corporate
Mm,
cruises that were leaving out of LA in the last year. Yeah, and I go out there to film stuff. The last
mm,
couple of times I did some cameos on AGT when Josh Blue was in the finals 2 years ago. I went out.
okay.
Um, we did a like Piff the Magic, a bunch of comics who had been in the finals before it came out to coach him in a skit. Stuff like that, little things, little TV appearances here and there. But there's so much work here. This is home base. I'm more of an East Coast comic, but I do get out there on occasion. When I do, I always have fun. I love working in LA. LA really, and I'm not besmirching it. I always say to comics, it's better to be a comic in New York and an actor in LA. And the
Mm,
reason being, we have like 18 clubs in Manhattan. They really have three big ones in New York, in LA. They have the Comedy Store, which was run by Mitzi Shore,
yep,
and then God rest her soul. And then we had Jamie at the Laugh Factory and Bud Freeman at the
mm,
Improv. And Bud, God rest his soul. But at the one time, they kind of hated each other, and
mm.
so they were very competitive. So if you worked for Bud at the Improv, you weren't allowed to work at the Comedy Store for Mitzi, or if you worked
Uh,
for Jamie at the Laugh Factory, you weren't allowed to work for Bud. And so the comics were like chess pieces in this little chess match. And unless you were a big gun, Robin Williams could work wherever he
mm,
wanted. But the guys at my level, when I was starting out, you had to be loyal to one club, and so it was just tougher. You less stage time. And then I have a buddy who still is a writer out there, and he'll wait 2 weeks for his spot at the Improv, and then he'll show up and get bumped. Damon Wayans will come in and do an
Mm.
hour, and so that rarely happens in New York. Yeah, there's so much work in New York. There's so many clubs that that's not an issue. But I know comics have moved to LA and had great careers and love it out there. I did a couple of pilot seasons out there. My twins were conceived out there, so it's very near and dear to me. But I'm a New York guy for comedy.
Okay. Well, what's on the agenda for today? You said you're performing later tonight somewhere, right?
Yeah, I'm just doing a little spot, a place close here, Levity, and then this afternoon I have another little thing I'm doing online. Comics work an hour a night generally, so our days are wide open. So that's why I love doing these things. During the pandemic, we couldn't
Mm.
work, so I lived on Zoom. I did so many Zoom shows. I bang out 2 and 3 a day, and I was happy to have them. They're tough. You had to listen to babies cry in the background, and people arguing and literally farting. And I listened to a guy argue with his pizza delivery guy for 5 minutes on a Zoom during middle of my act. And because he was louder than I was, he took over the Zoom. So, it's a nightmare. But during the time when we couldn't work, because you could never have anything with a live audience during the pandemic, this was everything. So I was very happy to have it. And that's why I still enjoy going on for these things. So
So, and
by the way, thank you very much for inviting me on. This is great. I've done a bunch of these, and you're much more pleasant than most.
oh, okay, yeah, that's good to know. Well, you're a good liar, and
Yeah.
was it just Zoom that you did, or did you dabble with like OnlyFans, or is there like a discount code I can tell the listeners, or?
No, I have no OnlyFans, sadly. But yeah, all those StreamYard and all those things. I did a million of them, and some of them uh, I would like to forget quickly. But other we had, they did pretty well for us because my wife's a comic and I'm a comic, and during the pandemic we had very little income, so
Mm.
the Zoom shows didn't pay that well, but the commute was easy, and so we did a bunch of them, and I was thankful to have them.
Awesome. Well, maybe one of these days I could have your wife on, and we'll get the other side of the story too, and then
Sure,
yeah.
the rebuttal.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Tom, one last quick question. Since you do travel or are used to traveling a lot, it made me wonder. I'm always tempted when I get into a hotel room to bust open that little fridge with the candy and the alcohol and the soda. Do you bust that open, or do you have willpower, or how do you do it?
It's so reasonably priced. How could you not? A $10 Snickers bar.
Yeah. Why not?
I I rarely break into the. Sometimes a corporation will hire me, and I won't have to give my credit card for incidentals, and then all bets are off. And then I'm out in the hallway handing them out to people. But yeah, my travel. I've been doing it for a long time. The other night, it took me 20 minutes. I was so hammered. I was trying to swipe into my room with a Costco card, and that wasn't good.
Yeah.
And I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I generally take the Gideon Bible out of the drawer and I use it to prop open the door so I can run to the ice machine. I do that on occasion. Uh, and I would never use an ice bucket for ice. I can tell you that because I know what people do to those things, and not good. And first thing I do when I check in, that bedspread is off. That bedspread is off and thrown in a corner and not touched because, that's you put one of those blue lights on that, and you're going to see it light up like a Christmas tree. And I don't want any part of that. But yeah, I stay at a lot of bed bug and breakfasts, I say.
Very nice.
But then, it comes with the territory.
Well, Tom, I'm excited to see you. Hopefully, one of these days you'll be over here, I'll be over there, and I'll get to see you do your thing. So, thanks again for coming on, and it was a lot of fun chatting with you.
I'm honored. It was really fun. And keep saving people's lives, and hopefully you'll come to a show sometime.